time. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things off, and then with the deck here, and then Doug, I'll just drive for you, and then you can kick it off once I do the initial kickoff here. All right, great. So there's your agenda. Okay, so I always do this every single time, just to give the quick intro, because I think it's still important so anyone that watching this understands what this is. So welcome to Salesforce Security Office Hours. This was created in response to a troubling reality that data breaches in the Salesforce ecosystem are increasing, not declining, especially recently. And too many organizations are losing customer-sensitive data to attacks that could have been prevented. And I think that's the important part, is most of these could have been prevented. And so these sessions exist to change that, to educate people so you know what you need to be doing. So each session we're looking at real world breaches and also sharing Salesforce specific security best practices that are presented by security experts like Doug here, providing you with actionable steps that you can take to strengthen your data security and reduce the risk of a breach in the Salesforce environment. All right, great. So rules of engagement here, as I said, first, everyone's mics are enabled to talk, so you can talk at any point in time. Just be respectful to others. If like someone's talking, then try to raise your hand. We'll answer questions as we're going on. But if no one's talking, feel free to just speak up. Take notes and walk away with something actionable. So the whole point of this is it's not just listening, you're finding something actionable you can take away today so that you can actually, make a change in your organization. So, all right, great. Next, so who am I? I am Matt Meyers. I am the CEO and founder of EzProtect and a certified technical architect with over 18 years of experience. I'm also the author of the best-selling book, Securing Salesforce Digital Experiences, and am a member of the founding Low Code Security Alliance. So, and Doug, if you want to introduce yourself really quick.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I was 13 years at Salesforce as a security engineer in the pre-sales team. And then 2021, I started my own business called Platinum 7. The main reason behind that was when I was at Salesforce educating customers around how Salesforce does what Salesforce does with security, they always said, that's great. Who can get to help me? And that was always a bit interesting question because there's very, very few partners out there who actually have security skills. So saw a bit of a gap in the market and decided to take it. So Platinum 7 was born 4 years ago now. And yeah, and it says in there, one of the first 3 Salesforce certified enterprise architects internally. Presented many times at Dreamforce. You may have seen one of the sessions called Salesforce Metadata, how we do the magic we do. And that was something which a lot of people really found quite interesting. And it's still relatively accurate today. Some of the infrastructure stuff has changed obviously with the whole move to Amazon Web Services and the new architectures, but it makes a big difference.
Yep. And also, I just wanted to let everyone know you're joining us from Australia, so thank you for joining at I think it's pretty early for you right now, right? Is it?
It's come out till just after 11 p.m., so it's not too bad.
Okay, late for you, pretty late for you. So yeah, so thank you for taking the time to join us at such a late hour. So, all
No
right,
dramas.
last thing, and then I'll let you kick this off. So, as always, Salesforce Security Office Hours is sponsored by EzProtect. As you guys all, we're focused on virus scanning and ensuring that orgs are secure. And so a lot of people don't understand that Salesforce doesn't scan for viruses. And so what we do is help ensure that orgs are virus-free, and whether that's malicious links or files. So, all right. And then I forgot we have a recap from last week, what we did last week. So we were talking a little bit about the connected apps and some user privilege things that we can do. So basically looking at making sure that you're auditing your connected apps and OAuth tokens regularly, making sure that especially now with those data breaches, implementing least privilege, deploying shield event monitoring, making sure you're securing your orgs with multi-factor IP-based security and other types of incident response procedures. If you remember, If you weren't watching last week, we went over the threat response lifecycle, showing you different things that you could be doing to ensure that that you could bring a security framework into Salesforce and what you could be doing to ensuring your orgs are secure. If you want to watch that, here's the QR code. So, okay, and then the last thing, not least, we've got, I always like to do a hot off the press every week. So, we'll talk a little bit about the sales drift data breach that happened. So as you can see here, the UNC 6395 compromised the SalesLoft drift application in Salesforce, and those credentials were used to sell data from multiple Salesforce customers. I believe one of the ones I saw recently, I think it was Cloudflare that was impacted, among others. The attackers, what they did is they compromised the OAuth tokens from the SalesDrift application to execute targeted queries against different objects, looking for like AWS keys, passwords, other things like that. And so multiple orgs, of course, had sensitive credentials that were exposed. That enabled further attacks. So it was like a multiple chain kind of attack happening once they were getting into those orgs with SalesDrift. From what I understand, is SalesDrift was actually removed from the app exchange itself in partnership with SalesDrift and Salesforce because of that. And all the tokens were actually revoked by Salesforce for anyone that was connected, which I actually find interesting with all these attacks that were happening. Why didn't Salesforce do that sooner, right? With all these attacks going on with like the data loader, fake data loader, and all the other things and these and tokens with these apps, and they knew the app. Why didn't they disable the token? It took this thing from Salesforce. So, but at least we know that that was now that had been is now turned off. So, but it's just yet one more example of a data breach recently. Again, I love, this slide keeps getting bigger. It's like the logo slide you do not want to be on, just to remind everyone, these are the companies that have been getting breaches. And the reason, again, we're doing this office hours is to remind people that this is real. This is not happening to, just a few companies. It's happening to major brands. As we can see, everyone on this list is a major brand. So if you are one of those brands, you are a target. And so you need to be ensuring that your orgs are secure and you're doing the right things. Otherwise, you might show up on this slide deck. All right. So anyway, so I think I'm just skip ahead here a little bit. So I always like to do a metric before. So stolen, compromised credentials were the most common initial attack vector, accounting for 16% of all attack vectors in 2025. And so 16% might sound like a small thing, but if you look at the broad scheme of things, that's a pretty big number considering, all the different types of ways people could do attacks. And so, yeah, and I think and here we go. This is the start of your session here, Doug. So I'll hand off the mic to you, and then you can just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for that, Matt. And just a quick note on the changes that Salesforce have made now, actually in everyone's orgs around the connected app stuff. They've also introduced a permission that allows you to bypass the changes that they've actually done to let anybody still use unauthenticated, uninstalled connected apps. Don't use that permission.
I
Just fix the
agree.
problem. Fix the problem, right? Install your
Yeah.
apps or block your apps. Give people the appropriate permission set or profile, and just don't use the override permission that Salesforce provides you. It's bonkers. They shouldn't let people do that. It's just not right.
Mhm. I agree. I agree. And also, one thing maybe we should talk just right before we kick off the session, talk about that quick change that Salesforce did, because I think everyone on the call, if you have a Salesforce org, it's probably going to impact you. Did you want to cover that really quick, Doug, or you want me to?
Yeah, I'm happy
Yeah.
to do so. So with the change, what they've done is any uninstalled connected app, and when they say installed, it actually is a misnomer. The apps, when they connect to your org, are already there. They're actually connected to your org. They are accessing your environment, or they can access your environment. What the install button does in Salesforce connected apps is just give the ability to manage it. So after they're installed, you can then manage the policies around that particular app. And the policy should be admin users only are pre-authorized. the default is everyone's authorized. And so what you should do is install your app, work out who should use it, and either it's going to be a profile, so things like data loader or data loader IO, maybe just system admins should be able to use that. So that's a profile based one. But if you've got an app which maybe 1 or 3 people need to use, create a permission set called allow space and app name. And it doesn't have to have anything in it, it just needs to exist as a permission set. Stick that in the configuration area, and that will only allow those people who have that particular permission set to use that particular application. And remember that permission sets also have a timeout feature. They can either be permanently allocated to the user, or they can time out after a week. So you actually give someone access to an app for a week, which is, you can change the time range. Could be anything. Could be a day, could be a week, could be a month, could be 16 days, whatever. It doesn't make any difference. So the good thing is, with your connected apps, any new app won't be able to connect. Just won't let it happen. You can't connect a new app to your org. It'll fail. It will appear in that list, and you've got to then unblock it and install it and do the stuff you need to do to actually allocate people. But the thing is, it grandfathers in old access. So if you have users who have already used an uninstalled app, they can continue to use it without change.
Yep.
I still think you really probably should fix that over time, but it doesn't break anything. That's why Salesforce had to do it that way. It doesn't break anything. But then the interesting part is, yes, you can't connect a new app, but also a new user can't use an already uninstalled app. So let's say Data.io connected, it's not installed, and both Matt and I used it, and therefore we can keep using it. But Eric hasn't used it yet. Eric tries to use it, it'll say no. So basically, It stops anybody new from using an old app or any new app connecting. And you do get grandfathered in. Now,
Yep.
what's going to happen soon, I think in next winter, not this winter coming up, but next winter, winter 2027, I think that's the right time. They're going to actually stop the SOAP login verb from happening. So you can't use login with the API with SOAP anymore after that particular release, which I think is winter next year. So I would strongly suggest, if you've got people currently building apps, a lot of big corporates have got apps connecting using SOAP at the moment. I see it all the time. You need to change that to some form of OAuth connection to actually make it able to connect from then on, because login's not going to work anymore with SOAP. So basically, in a nutshell, what they've done is they've protected people from uninstalled apps, which is great. They've also, in detail, they've got rid of the device flow for every uninstalled app, and obviously removed device flow from data loader and other apps that Salesforce has as well. So that's also a good thing. And so if you do create a connected app, unless there's a really, really good reason, don't give it device flow capabilities. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
my little crazy.
So I think the just to summarize things here. So if if you have any App Exchange packages that have data integrations today, which is most of them, it would continue to work today as is. But if let's say you want to change the integration user using that app, then it's going to it'll fail. If you add a new integration to that, or you haven't set up an integration yet with that app and you install the app, but the connected app is not installed, then that's going to fail. So I'll give you example of EzProtect today, since Eric, one of our customers, is on the call. So Eric, what you should do is make sure you install the EzProtect app, because if, let's say, in the future you decide to refresh the token, change the integration user, then it would no longer be able to connect to your org. So, and you should be checking all of your apps in that way, and to make sure that they're installed and trusted, because that could cause you issues. Obviously, like you said, I think any app should be installed. That way you have those deeper security controls as well. And go ahead, Eric. I know you have a question.
Yeah, well, yeah, question and a comment. First off, I appreciate you discussing all of this because we did see the email from Adaptus about kind of around all this stuff, and we've been kind of trying to get our head around it for the last couple of days. Um, yeah, so I appreciate all the clarification on this because we saw that we weren't quite sure what the impacts were of the change that Salesforce was making and how EzProtect was going to function because I like so in our org we do see EzProtect continuing to scan files. So like we were kind of like, okay, well it's continuing to work. We don't know how urgent of a change this needs to be. So we were kind of trying to figure out how to prioritize this with the rest of the work that we're doing. But so I guess from what we saw, like EzProtect is still continuing to function. I assume that's because we still have the same service account that we've been using since we did the install with you, Matt. So I mean, it's not like it's going to continue to function, but it this there may possibly be a risk for some kind of breach or something if we don't kind of do that thing where we have to click the install button. Does that sound correct, Matt?
Well, I mean, we're just using, of course, we're just using EzProtect here as an example, but let's just say, from the broader perspective here. So first off, I think it's important that you look at all your apps because, just to make sure that because you could have a malicious app in your org potentially, right? And so by adding that install and then that's going to help you have other controls like adding IP security to those apps, ensuring that all those that people are not able to do what they know. Also, auditing what connected apps are in your org, that's very good, right? I would also say another thing you probably want to do is audit for your users what apps have been connected as well, because if they have an existing app connected right now, they could have a malicious app connected that you don't know about. And that's another reason. But more so for your existing apps that you do trust, if you do nothing, they're going to continue to work until you need to make a change. But once you need to make that change, something happens and then maybe you forget about it, then that system will stop working. So like for, what we're saying that the most basic example is changing the running user of that integration user. If you change that user, now it's going to fail. And so that's why it's more, I would say prioritize that right now to just get all test and first in a sandbox, but then install all of your connected apps that you trust. And then ones you don't know that they are, then start, auditing those, and then audit all your users to see what connected apps they have connected to their accounts to ensure that there is nothing that they shouldn't have. I think that would be the best guidance I could give. And I
Yeah,
think Doug,
agreed.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
basically, if you go through the connected apps list, you'll see every connected app that's in your org in at the moment. And when I do my customer org assessments, you'd be surprised. There's so many interesting, in double quotes, applications that are connected that haven't been used since 2021 maybe. But
mm,
and I say, what is this app? And they go, I don't know. I said, well, why is it connected to your org? And they go, I don't know. I said, well, how about you block it and see who screams?
yep,
Because
exactly,
if you don't know what it is, why let it connect? And
yep.
so
And
that's why you're doing audit of these connected apps. But also, when you have a connected app like DocuSign or some other big app like that, you need to make sure you understand who should be able to use it and make sure that when you do install it, you give access to all the correct people
yep.
to actually still let them do their
That's what you're
job.
talked about today, kind of, is the integration user and the different things like that. And I think this is still kind of on topic for our talk today too. So
It
which is
is.
good. Yeah. So I think on all of those apps, you just want to it's amazing. Like I said, if you look at like for example, pick an admin, one of your admins, maybe yourself, Eric, and then go look at your user profile and look at all the connected apps you probably have connected to your profile. You'll probably be surprised, or an old, or someone that's been there a very long time at the company, you would be surprised like how many organizations have access to your data, and it's kind of scary. And then maybe they're not malicious, but what if they get a breach? So I think it's all about
Stop
limiting.
stealing my thunder, mate. Stop stealing my
Yeah,
thunder.
yeah. Sorry, it's limiting the exposure, right? Is really what
Yeah,
you
totally
want
agree.
to do. Yeah, like there was a couple of weeks ago, I think I did another talk where someone asked on the talk, well, what's the harm in giving our internal users, the public read write to the account object? in Salesforce, because that, you know, we trust our internal users, but what if that internal user gets breached, right? And now you've given whoever breached it access to your entire customer list. Instead of only giving them the data that they need to see to do their job, you may trust them, but you don't, but it's limiting that exposure of when a breach will happen, because it will someday, right? So anyway, I think, you know, I think we can move on to the topic at hand if you want to, you know, get to, I'm a little bit too much of a sidebar here, but I think it's still on topic. So
it is definitely. In fact, we're going to be covering some of the things we just spoke about just then in the next couple of slides. But basically, today's topic's all around how can improper integration user configuration expose your org to data hackers. And so this is the interesting thing, because integration is something that has to happen in Salesforce orgs to make things function, because you're not going to use Salesforce for everything. Salesforce fully understand that, which is why they have a very, very powerful API. And the challenge comes is when you configure that incorrectly. So if we go to the next slide, please, Matt. You haven't reloaded this, I don't think. I've saved the copy on the web, mate. Sorry.
okay, yeah. Maybe you can share the deck and say, sorry, I thought I grabbed it, but I didn't get the latest version. Apologies.
That's all right, no worries. I will present
So,
slideshow from current slide. Yep, that's great.
while we're doing that, let's see.
Okay, so I will go back to here and I will share my screen. Okay, so you should be seeing that. Yes, you are. Okay, great. So
I'm not
do you
seeing
have
it
the
just, okay, there we go. Yep, we see it.
yeah. So basically, how could improper integration user configuration actually expose your data to hackers? That's the key trick, right? Integration has to happen. You need to do it, but it's obviously a little bit risky because getting third parties into your org. So let's discuss this. So as an overview, integration, like everything in Salesforce, is done as a Salesforce user. So even the guest user on your communities or guest user on force.com sites, these are still Salesforce users, which means they have a profile and they may have permission sets like every other user in the system. Now, the profiles and permission sets have data access rights as well as system permissions, as per usual. And the external application gains every one of these access rights and permissions. That's why this can be a little bit challenging when you actually have your integration done incorrectly. And so when we look at the actual threat and how can it happen, when I do assessments on customer orgs, the number of times that, let's start again, 100% of my customers have integration running as system administrators. And that is just definitely a big, big risk, because the external system can now access and extract all the data in your org, because system admin has got view all data and modify all data. This external system can also now deactivate all your users, because system administrators have got the permission modify users. You also have the external system could now delete and or corrupt all the data in your org. Now, deleting probably isn't as bad as you think it is. Corrupting actually is probably worse, because how do you tell which bit's been corrupted? So having integration as system administrator is just really, really dangerous, because that app now has got complete access over your org. And I don't think you really mean to do that. There's very, very, very few integrations that need to be done as system administrator. You could argue that the backup tools might be a use case for that, because they've got to have such broad access and they've got to be able to modify metadata, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, some people actually tend to have read-only access for everything for the backup tool, and then when something does go wrong, they've got to give it a whole bunch more permissions, let it recreate stuff, which can be a little bit of a mess. Now, you already are trusting the backup company to actually keep all your data, so is it really a risk? Well, it's up to you to really decide. But in all honesty, if you're trusting them to keep all your data anyway, then that's probably the way it is. So the big risk is if the external system is not yours, right? And that company is compromised, this allows for supply chain attack. And that's exactly what happened in the breach DataLoft, right? So, sorry, SalesLoft. That's SalesLoft, isn't it? Yeah, SalesLoft. So they got compromised, but then they used those connected apps to then attack the Salesforce orgs. Now, with that, if they were connecting as Salesforce system administrators, that means that the hacker got access to all the data. And we'll talk about what you should do next. But basically, what you should look at doing is minimizing your number of integrations if possible, and then we'll discuss the more details in a sec. But each of these integrations we're talking about could either use OAuth authentication, so i.e. connected apps, or a SOAP login. And you can block connected apps, and Salesforce are blocking automatically now, which is great. But you cannot block SOAP logins at the moment unless you use the API access control feature of Salesforce, which is not automatically not enabled. It's not automatically activated in your org. So you can't see it in the setup tree. If you want to use it, you've actually got to ask Salesforce tech support to turn it on for you. Now, this API access control feature won't be needed after Salesforce block the SOAP login from happening next year sometime. So basically what Salesforce have done with the most recent updates is give you all the benefits of API access control. Well, 95% of the benefit of API access control right now, which is great. So that's really good. But basically, the threat and potential impact is that if you have integrations that are over provisioned, then what you're doing is letting third parties possibly do all those really bad things to your data. Now, I'm not going to ask for anybody to say if you've got this set up or not, because more than likely you have. And what I'd like to do now is discuss a little bit more about how you can go about making this a better thing to actually get rid of this particular risk, or at least minimize it as much as possible. Because obviously risks can't be totally mitigated, because the only way to really protect your data is stick it in a computer system and turn it off. And then no one can use it, and it's always perfectly safe because you can't steal it because no one can see it. But it doesn't really give it any benefit. So
yeah, like I think one of the things I always I say is there's a couple quotes I like to use. First, I think it was you probably heard me say this when I did the users group in Australia. I think it was Roosevelt, one of the U.S. president, that said, like, if you want complete security, then go to prison. There you're housed, closed, and fed, but you have no freedom. Or if you want a complete secure system, lock it in a room with no windows or doors, but then it's completely unusable, right? And
yeah,
I think that's that's kind of thing, finding that middle ground. One question I did have for you though is, and maybe you're going to cover this later, what's your take on using, for the connected apps at least, that not the SOAP of course, but the connected apps themselves have all the settings, and then you have the scopes. And using the scopes as another way to limit the type of access that people have to your org.
Yeah, definitely. So I do gloss over that a little bit because it's quite complicated to actually have those scopes configured appropriately. And I don't think you can really change it on third-party connected apps.
Yeah, I think I think more so what I'm was going towards is, with your providers, making sure your providers are, are, when you're doing a review of the apps, because it's so easy and so many providers just put, everything right on all scopes, and because it's just easy, instead of only the scopes that are necessary, right? For example, if you need to access chatter data, then only enabling the chatter API. Right, versus everything under the sun, which you find very common that they do, and then that might be a red flag for that provider. One other thing I was going to mention too, what you covered on, was like that over permissioning of integration users, because we actually did an audit internally ourselves, and we found, and this is probably not surprising, that most of our customers had given us admin access to their orgs, and we don't have control over that, is the problem. So what we actually had to start doing is putting into our contracts that we are not responsible for data breaches for over permissioning. Because when there's a data breach, then someone starts pointing the finger, especially when we know a lot of customers are sharing that user across multiples as well. And I know you'll probably talk about that later too. So
yeah, we'll talk about that later. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so with the OAuth scopes, I've actually written a connected app which I provide to customers, and it's only got 3 scopes possible. One of them is the identification URL, the data access, and access at any time. So because it lets it keep its refresh tokens going. And so I don't have everything else. I just have those minimal amounts of information, and we'll discuss that next. But the scope is something, so totally correct with that, Matt. When you're doing your assessment of apps that do connect to your org, have a look at the scope, and if it's really broad, ask them why, because it probably doesn't need to be that broad. And as Matt said, it's mainly because the developers are being a bit lazy, probably. And so that's something I would suggest to have a good look at. So let's now get into the what can you do to protect your org. Right. So step number 1, have one user per integration. That is key. The reason behind that one user per integration is that you can minimize the access for each user, and therefore you can minimize the access for each integration to just what it needs to have. Now you're going to say, oh my God, Salesforce charges me $7,000 million per user per year, so that's going to cost me a fortune. Well, no, not true. Salesforce give you 5 integration user licenses for free. You've got them in your org already. You may have used some, but most people haven't even seen that they exist. So they're 5 for free. And if you need more of them, the price is $120 US a year, which is cheap as chips, really. So why should you use these? Well, these system integration user licenses have a couple of benefits. A, they're cheap. B, it means that you can have one integration per user and not break the bank. It means that you can also have these, you can also release the users that you were using for integration back to being real humans. So for example, if you're following best practice and actually had one user per integration, you had 10 integrations, then you have 10 actual Salesforce licenses, which you could give back to real humans rather than you waste them, in double quotes, on integration only users. So these integration user licenses are very, very powerful. They can't do everything. So in my opinion, I think about 95% of integrations could use one of these integration user licenses. Things like backup tools can't, and neither can things like, basically backup tools couldn't use it because they need to have a bunch of system permissions, which these users can't have. So there are some challenges, but even so, sorry, someone had a question?
That was going to be one of my questions for you also, is in what use cases would you not be able to use an integration user? I mean, do you know like the quick and dirty of like the top level limitations of the integration user license itself?
Yeah, it's got a limit on which particular permissions can be allocated to it. My application that I use is a backup tool for event monitoring logs to keep them forever. And the challenge is in the event monitoring logs, certain fields are only available to users that have certain system permissions. Don't ask me why, because the thing is, it's a log file, right? It's just got IDs in it. It's got no user data at all. So I don't comprehend why they get all uppity about it. But basically, you can't get a report name, and you can't get you can get the report ID, you can't get the report name, and you can't get something else, because those 2 fields in the event monitoring logs are only available if you have certain system permissions, and you can't grant the system permissions to the Salesforce integration user license. So there are some challenges, but basically that's why you play with it and see if it works. But like I said, 99% of the time, you're perfectly okay if using standard objects in Salesforce or even custom objects. It's not a problem. It's just some of these edge cases like like event monitoring files and that type of stuff, which could cause some challenges. And if you need
That
to
makes
do
sense.
a lot of metadata stuff and user creation and that sort of stuff, you probably can't do that either. But give it a go and see what happens. It won't hurt.
Yep, and I think I would say, to anyone that that use those integration users for that 99%, and then when you have that 1%, still just make the choice, spend the money, because I mean, even if let's say you're paying $3,000 a year for a license for an integration, it's a lot cheaper than the minimum of 8 million, 9 million for a single breach, and that doesn't even talk about the long-term effects, which could be over 100 million or more. So 3,000 is a lot less than $100 million.
That's totally true. And so it also is just tidier. And I've got a bit of OCD, so I like having things tidy. And so having one user per integration is why I like it to be that way, because it is tidy and also makes it nice and simple. So let's say you have an app which is just integrating, let's say SAP integrating into Salesforce, right? And it needs to have access to leads, opportunities and accounts and contacts, because an opportunity can get change one, and when it's closed, then obviously SAP needs to know about it. It then needs to also ship product out of the SAP system, and then it can update the opportunity with that has been shipped. So that sort of flow is just a regular integration as per most systems would have. And for that, it needs to have access to a couple of things. So let's have a look at what that user should have access to. Well, only the objects necessary. So in this particular example, it needs to have access to accounts and to opportunities and also to contacts. Which fields does it need out of each of them? Well, it only needs to have the opportunity ID, so I can find it. It needs to have the opportunity status. So when the status goes to closed one, it can then be sent off to the SAP to be billed and shipped. And when it's shipped, it needs to have update permissions on the status. So only give objects that are necessary, only give the fields that are necessary, and make it read-only unless it's necessary to be read-write. So what you can now do is say, right, this user has access to these 3 objects, these 6 fields, and they can modify this field and nothing else. So that will give you enough of just enough to let it do its job. It's exactly the same scenario as a human. It's least privilege principles. Give people as little as possible to let them do their job, no more. Because if you give them more, then as Matt said earlier, if they get compromised or they become a bad actor, then they can take everything and run. So for example, salespeople, the number of times I've actually been asked by a Salesforce customer, can you see what this guy did in my org? Because he's buggered off to the competition and I think he's stolen all of our leads and contacts. And so if you didn't give them full access to all that sort of stuff, they wouldn't be able to take it away. So really minimize what people can see and what they can do. And this means also users for integration. Now, you probably will need view all per object. So for example, on the account and the contact and the opportunities, in this particular example, you probably need view all on all of them so it can find the appropriate things. They can say, give me all the opportunities which have become closed won in the last 2 days, and they can pull them out and they can then take them away to SAP and process them over there. So view all per object may be needed. Sometimes modify all might be needed, but that's more rare. In all honesty, you probably wouldn't need modify all most of the time, but it may be needed. Now, the view all and modify all on an org-wide basis probably does not need to be given at all. That's in my opinion, about a 90% you don't need it. Now, if you do need to have that turned on, or the partner says, oh, I've got to have this, I've got to have view all data, and I've got to have modify all data, get them to write down that, make sure they're responsible for that. It's like one of these, can you please put that in an email to me? So you've got it in writing. Because if someone tells you to do something that's dodgy, if you ask them to send you an email confirming that, they're not going to do it because they don't want a written trail, right? So if you're asked to grant too much access to this particular integration, ask somehow in contact or whatever to actually mitigate that risk. So if they get compromised, they get to pay. And that's one of the things that you might want to actually point out to them, that you're asking to be system admin. Do you realize then if you get hacked, I can lose all my information? In that particular case, you're going to get your asses sued big time. How about you minimize what you need to have?
And then one
So,
other thing I would say too, on top of that, is when you're installing a package, if they don't have permission sets defined in that package, that's probably a red flag too, because then then they're probably going to be asking you to do the system admin, or they haven't really thought through the permissions that carefully of what their application actually needs, right?
you're correct. Yep. And I get customers saying, how do I know what they need? And it says, well, go ask them. Oh, they don't know. Well, in that
If
case,
they don't
nothing
know,
wrong
then
there.
it's probably kind of scary, and maybe you shouldn't be doing business with them.
Yeah,
So,
correct. It's one of these red flags, right? So, and unfortunately, you can't tell what they need either, even if you have event monitoring, because it only shows the fields that get accessed in queries, not in updates or creations. So it's a bit of a challenge. But anyway, so the permission set should just be one permission set too. Don't have 17 permission sets for this one integration user. Just have one permission set that has just the objects, just the fields, and go from there. Now, if it needs some system permissions as well, that's fine. Just make sure you document each of them, because now with the permission sets, at least you can click the button saying, give me a summary. It tells you what permissions actually are granted, which is quite nice. Now,
so I have a question actually on top of that. What the recommendation you said. So you said just have a single permission set for their integration user. So not using permission sets and stacked upon a permission set group for your integration user.
generally,
Right.
yes, because I mean, you want to try and keep it as simple as possible, right? And if you've got permission set groups bunched everywhere, if you change the permission set group because the normal user's got to do it, does integration need it as well?
Yep.
Probably
That's
not.
correct. So basically you would, and I'm just trying, asking questions just to get clarity for everybody. So from a user perspective, individual user perspective, permission set groups make sense because you kind of have overlapping permissions, different roles. But when you're an integration user, just going to that single permission set makes more sense because it's very specific to that integration, right? And makes it
Correct.
easier to manage.
Yeah, exactly. And if they need another field, you can give them another field. It's not a problem.
Yep. And then obviously we're saying permission sets because Salesforce is moving away from profiles, because at this point, a single permission set versus profile is pretty much the same thing. And so would
Yeah,
you also
correct.
go to say, like, what profile should they be using for your integration user then?
That's a very good point. Well, the integration user actually has only one profile it can use, which is the minimal integration, minimal access Salesforce integration profile. I think that's the correct name, but it's only got one you can use. And so with that, that can basically access nothing. And that's why you've got to have the permission set to then grant it what it needs to have access to.
Yep. So would you suggest that they have only a single the minimal access integration user profile shared across all their integration users, and then
Yes,
separate permission sets? And because
correct.
it really makes sense to have multiple different profiles for each integration user if there's no permissions being set on the profile, right?
Yeah, correct. So basically the profile should be basically empty, should have nothing, access to zip. And then you
Yep.
grant it with permission sets. And that way it makes it much tidier, because Salesforce, as you say, are going away from profiles.
Yep.
And profiles are just going to be used in the future for things like default page layout, pick list values, IP restrictions, date and time you can log in, those types of things, session timeouts, those types of things which are not permissions, they're capabilities of that particular user. So after you've got the permission set sorted out, for a little bonus speed pickup, this is something that people don't necessarily realize, but on each user record in Salesforce, there's a no MRU updates checkbox. What that means is no most recently used updates. So when you go into Salesforce, you get a list view of what the most recently you looked at contacts, whatever, when you go to the contact tab. why does API users need to have a most recently used? They're never going to access it. So basically, if you turn that checkbox on, it won't store most recently used, which that means then it's going to be a little bit quicker for you when actually you start doing integrations. And for really good information, this is how long it's been out for, 2023. So it's been out for 2 years. So this link here is actually from a Salesforce architect inside of Salesforce who's actually done a really good article about how to actually do best practice for configuring integration users. So instead of me going through all the nitty-gritty detail and stuff, just go to that link. They'll give you a good lot of information about that as well. But I just wanted to cover that off. It's coming up to 10 minutes to the end of the hour. So I think it's probably time now to look at Q&A.
Sure. And then I'll go ahead and go through a few of the questions that have been posted already. And then if you want to answer. So first off, says as admins, what are the steps we can take to make 100% sure that we can see any unconnected apps that users may have connected in the past and that may or may not be still connected?
Right. Okay. So I might stop the sharing and bring up my actual org and show you some stuff. Would that be okay?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okie doke. So I stop this sharing. I'm going to bring up my Salesforce org and I will give you a look at what I've got in my org and see how they actually work. And that way it might make it a little bit clearer because it's always easier, I think, actually to show rather than talk. So with this.
Before you go into that, one thing we've had a few people join. I just want to let everyone know that's joined since then that talking is permitted. So if you have any questions, feel free to just ask a question, or if you want to speak up and ask a question to Doug. Thanks.
Yep, no worries. So I will now share my screen. Okay, so excellent. You can see that, which is brilliant. So now I'm in my Salesforce org, and if I go to connected apps, so your connected apps OAuth usage is the part of Salesforce which will show you every connected app. Now, the question was about the question was, how do you tell apps that are not connected anymore? Well, they won't be in this list, basically, which means they don't have access to your org anymore. But in my org, you can see that each one of them has been installed because they've all got manage app policies in here. Now in yours, if you click on the link here, for that number, it'll show you the user that all the users that have used that particular app and when was the last time they used it and how many users have they had. Now, if you've got a user in here and you think, what the heck is George doing with this particular app? You can go across and revoke it. Bingo, George has now lost access. So that's a good way of looking at some of that sort of stuff. Now, I wish that wouldn't be there. Anyway, so, okay, so you've got your connected apps and you can see who's used it. When you go to your policy, if you look at the workbench policy I've got here, for example, the workbench policy says that admin approved users are pre-authorized. So that's not the default. The default is everybody's authorized to use it. So I've changed it and I've added in here the profile and permission sets of those particular people who can use it. So that means it just makes it so much easier to control exactly who gets access to those particular apps. So this is my backup tool that I have. And if you look at the policies in here, the policy is the only people that can use it are people who have the allow Platinum 7 event monitoring download permission set. And if I click at that permission set and look at the assignments, you can see it's just one user called event monitoring backup. And it's got the minimum access API only integrations. And that shows you that it's doing the minimum sort of stuff. It's got one permission set, which has then got the appropriate permissions. So you can do a view summary and you can see the permissions that it actually has. So what are the user permissions? It's API enabled, it's API only, which is another good thing. So when you do have integration users, make them API only, so it can't log into the UI. And it's got the other settings in there as well. What objects can it see? It can't see any objects. So basically, if someone manages to compromise this particular user, they can't see anything. All they can get is the Salesforce event monitoring logs, which isn't much use to anybody. So that's a really good benefit. So that's why having this one permission set makes it easy to see. Did that answer the question?
Yep. I'm not sure who asked it, but I think that sounds like pretty sufficient. One thing I also would say is like you have like the user access report is another good way to see a specific user, what they have access to, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I don't have that in this particular org, but every time I go to do a customer assessment, and we'll make sure we publish the link of that as well when in the post on LinkedIn, that actually the user access report is a free App Exchange product. If you read the instructions on how to install it and how to use it, it's really simple. It's had a couple of bad reviews because people can't read. But basically, it's a really, really powerful, really simple to use app. Just read the instructions and it's fine. And this tool will actually give you information about either the guest user or internal users or external users. What data can they see and why can they see it? So they can see 5,000 account objects, account records, and they can see them mainly because they own them. Well, that's a bit strange if they're a guest user, right? Maybe we should fix that. And that sort of stuff is a really powerful tool for that.
Yeah, one thing I was also I maybe I was saying the wrong terminology, but it's I was talking more towards but that's also great. The App Exchange app is the built-in feature when you click on a user and you can see all the access where that user's getting it from.
Yeah, that's in the user. Whoops.
It's if you go to user record, you go to users, and then it's like I thought it was called user access report, but maybe it's something different now. It's usually at the bottom. It's there. Let me see here.
There is a guest user sharing rule access one.
Yep, that's no, this is actually on the user record itself. It's usually at the bottom or something, but it's something new that was just released not too long ago, and it basically displays all the access that user has, or maybe it could be the profile. It's either the user or profile. Maybe it's on the profile, not the user.
It might be on the profile. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but basically shows where all the access is coming from for that profile, I believe.
So here's your profile here, and you can see all the assigned connected apps to the profile, all the assigned apps themselves.
Yeah, I forget where that is. Anyway, we're running out of
there you
time,
go.
so let me get to a couple of the other questions. So Beach
Yep.
asked a question. I've not come across a third-party external client app, the successor to connected apps in the wild, or authored one yet. Can the end client impose additional restrictions, such as reducing the trusted IPs on third-party external client apps they've installed, as the configuration is no longer global? I'm not sure if you know that or not.
That's a really good question. I, again, like you, haven't actually managed to use one yet myself. My connected app at the moment is not an external app. That's only released, I think, last release.
Yep.
And I haven't actually had a chance to do that myself yet. So I will be getting there. I haven't done it yet myself. So my apologies. I can't give you a definitive answer on that one.
Yeah, we're working to get to that ourselves. We're about to migrate our apps to that. Last question from Beach had one other, which was I've always cloned the minimum access API only integrations profile to make a new one, then restricted the IPs. The reason being connected apps normally have trusted IPs for all their geographical reasons. But with the profile, I can just lock it down to their UK IPs, etc. So what's the question there, Beach? And I think that was more of a statement.
Oh yeah, it was just sorry. I think it was saying that there's only one profile, and I'm like, I normally clone that API only integrations profile in order to further restrict the IPs.
Yeah. So if you don't want to use IP ranges, because sometimes connected apps can come from anywhere, because it might be running on Amazon or something, and therefore it might be a bit of a challenge to actually restrict it to an IP. But if you do want to restrict it, which makes perfect sense if you can do that, then definitely cloning the profile and doing that is perfectly sensible.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, that was one of the questions I actually had as well when it comes to IP security, would you suggest that they set IP security on the profile in addition to the connected app? Or because if you set it on the profile, it's kind of covering the connected apps, right?
Yeah, because you've only got one user for that particular profile, which is one user for the integration. So yes, it does belts and braces.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I mean, if you want to share, I mean, if you have shared the shared profile, then you want to definitely be setting the IP security on the connected apps. But if you're having individual profiles, you could set the IP security per profile. And I think we would all suggest any provider you have that's external specifically, you should always have that IP security turned on.
Yeah. And hopefully they've got a fixed IP address to make it easy for you to do that.
Yep, that would be good. One last question is like, what was the name of the app to check logins again? I think they're meaning maybe the security. Maybe I don't know if it's logins. I think it was more of I don't know who it says anonymous attendees. So I'm not sure who, but maybe it was checking the permissions, the app that you were talking about. The user access report, I think it was called, right?
Yeah, user access report. If the person who asked that question, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and ask it, that'd be great.
And if not, that's fine.
Okay, that's fine. No problem at all. Yeah, but we'll put the user access report link in the show notes to this recording.
Yep. Okay, sounds good. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oops. I thought we had the LinkedIn slide. That's fine. We did that earlier. So here's a couple of resources as well. Glad to have a look at that. So these resources on the left are from EzProtect, the security resources in the middle, plus the digital experiences, how to secure them, which is really good stuff. And then there's a link off to my security stuff as well for consulting if you're interested in that sort of thing as well. But we're now at the hour, but I'm happy to stay a bit longer if people have got questions.
Yep. We're always happy to do that. So I think the floor is open now. Anyone that just wants to speak, ask a question, feel free to speak up. If not, we'll close this out.
I just wanted to say that no MRU hint. I'd completely forgotten about that or even thought about it. That's brilliant. Thank you.
You're very welcome. If you learn one thing a day, it's a brilliant day.
Yeah. Cheers. Very illuminating. I love the talk. It's free. Cool.
No worries. More than welcome.
All right, great. One more call for questions. Anyone have any further questions before we close out?
Hi, Matt. Just a quick question. First of all, thank you so much. It was a really good session. And is the recording available after the session to us?
Yes. The recording is going to be on the EzProtect website. Just go to ezprotect.io, look at resources and videos. Then it will be posted there. And pretty soon we're going to be coming up with a dedicated page for all the office hours upcoming and in the past.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, great. Well, thank you. It seems like we have no more questions. So thank you again, Doug, for joining us. And if anyone wants to talk to Doug some more, you could look at that QR code he was put up there earlier. If not, I'm sure you're available to be reached out to on LinkedIn as well. So
definitely, no problem at all. And I really appreciate the time everyone joined. And thanks for the questions. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your day, folks. Cheers.
yep, thank you. Bye.
Bye.